The day of Tisha B'Av swiftly approaches. It is the saddest day on the Jewish calendar. In fact, the day that this Dvar Torah is posted will be on Tisha B'Av. And we know that classically everyone refers to when it comes to Tisha B'Av, and rightfully so, the issue that the Gemara in Baba Batra says that one of the reasons why the Batei HaMikdash were destroyed was because of Sinat Chinam, unwarranted hatred. It wasn't that the Jewish people didn't get along. That would be one thing. It was that they exhibited hatred, sin'ah, towards one another. That is a very, very powerful emotion for one to exhibit to someone else. In fact, one of the times we find it in the Torah is by the brothers of Yosef, who says, the Torah says, Vayisneu oto echav. The brothers actually hated Yosef to the extent that it led to their attempting murdering their brother. So it's quite a powerful thing. Sinah is not a good thing to have amongst us, and therefore, presumably on Tisha B'Av, we're supposed to reflect as well in terms of how it can be rectified, or at least, at the very least, how it can be conquered and laid to rest for the sake of our perpetuation. And what's fascinating is that we also know, the Gemara tells us that the Parsha of Dvarim always needs to intercede, always needs to be or precede the day of Tisha B'Av. We read Parshat Dvarim beforehand. And one of the emphasis that exists in this Parsha is an emphasis on the word Shmiya, lishmoa, to hear. In fact, we know, sure enough, that it says, V'atzaveh shoftechem ba'etahi lemor shamoa bein achechem. Listen amongst your brethren. Next pasuk, it also says, Kakaton kagadol tishmeun lo taguru b'nei ish. Be him small, minor, or have a major role amongst the Jewish people, tishmeun, listen. The idea of shmi'ah, to listen to one another, demonstrates a tolerance. It demonstrates consideration. In fact, the Gemara tells us that the reason why the halacha is always according to the house of Hillel, Beit Hillel, is because they always listened to what Beit Shammai had to say. They would always weigh and measure and assess Beit Shammai's opinion with respect and consideration. Not only consideration, but sensitivity towards someone else. Shmi'ah, to listen, is the beginning of demonstrating that empathy, that consideration, that sensitivity that leads to a greater awareness and to greater tolerance, and destroys, presumably, that hatred or potential dislike that can exist amongst one person to another. It all begins with Shmi'ah. In fact, in the Haftarah of Parshat Dvarim, it says, Shimu shamayim v'ha'azini aretz. Chazon Yeshayahu Hanavi, Isaiah the prophet also says, Shimu shamayim, we must be able to listen, to hear, to have shmiyah. To be able to listen means to be able to understand, and that's where it all begins. By nurturing listening, it nurtures unwarranted love and tolerance, consideration amongst one another. If we have and demonstrate that shmiyah, that tolerance, then hopefully we'll be zocha to a rebirth, a reconstruction of the Mikdash. It all begins there. And we'll be zocha to be able to proclaim the other Shmiya. Od Yishama be'arei Yehuda u'bechutzot Yerushalayim kol sason v'kol simcha, kol chatan v'kol kala. Od Yishama. There will come a time when we will hear. What will we hear? Not only hearing one another, but as a result of that, being able to partake with one another in simcha, in rejoicing, in escorting a chatan and kala, presumably the marriage between the Jewish people and HaKadosh Baruch Hu and God, to their chuppah, to resurrecting their relationship, to reconstructing their rapport, and as a result of that, reconstructing ultimately the Batei HaMikdash b'mehera b'yameinu. This is the idea that the Shmi'ah is meant to represent. And sure enough, immediately after Tisha B'Av, we arrive at the Chodesh of Elul, the Chodesh of Elul, where we begin to lishmoa kol shofar, to hear the shofar, to listen to those voices around us, to those messages that might be transparent, but that we have to embrace and understand and appreciate. That Shmi'ah leads to a greater understanding not only of man to man, ultimately of man to God. This should be our approach on Tisha B'Av, not only to, of course, reflect upon destruction, but reflect upon what it is that will take us to lead to our reconstruction. B'mehera b'yameinu, amen. This is the Torah way, it is the Jewish way, and it always will remain the Gila way. May we only know good things in the future.